Hi, SCC. Welcome to a very special episode of the Becoming That One House podcast. We are coming at you from the shack, and yes, it's time for the UpNate you've been waiting for.
You just call the UpNate. I got it.
We've been calling it that.
That's
for
a long-running
years.
joke.
Yes.
Welcome again, SBC. Today I am joined by, of course, Ben Taylor. You know him. You love him. Senior pastor. We got Neil as a new person on the podcast. He's a new member of the media team. He's going to be what I've been referring to as my field reporter, making videos, going places, covering events when I can't do it. And then our very special guest, Mr. Nate Wagner. I am going to throw it to Ben to introduce him.
Yeah, great. So this is Nate Wagner. He and I have worked together at Sparta Center Church, formerly Sparta Baptist, for almost 23 years. This past September, God called him out of full-time church ministry and into some full-time consulting and counseling, which we were very excited about for he and Karla. Also missed them very much, and so it's great to stay connected. Nate is on our payroll still at church as a global liaison to our missionary partners, which is wonderful. Helps with communication and build the relationships and short-term trips and all those kinds of things. He and Karla are facilitating the retreat this weekend, which is also awesome. It's just such a privilege to be able to continue the partnership in some way, shape, or form. I love that our people get access to he and Karla still, and especially our newer people, that they get to meet he and Karla and get to benefit from their ministry. And so this is a great weekend for us.
All right. And then so before we get into it, I just want to make everyone aware, because we are in kind of a public-ish place. We do have a live studio audience. If you hear any uproars, any angry
Canned
mobs,
laughter.
that's coming from these people over here.
Canned laughter.
Anyway, so to start off, Nate, can you give us an update just at your life, like what you're doing with the Actuator Leadership Group, how that's going, just to give our people an update on you.
Yeah, what a joy and a privilege to be here, to be a part of the podcast, also to be on the retreat with a group of people that we've got decades of relationships with. And as Ben said, serving together and just walking and doing life together for so many years. So after making the most difficult decision of our lives, Karla and I transitioned out of SCC in September, and we knew it was going to be a tough transition. We knew it was going to come with some unique challenges, but we are so incredibly grateful that what we felt the burden for, and we felt like God was calling us to, the confirmation both before but then since we have transitioned has just come in so many different ways. The doors that have been open, opportunities that have been afforded to us, the unique environments that we have been invited into to walk with leaders, to walk with churches, to step into missional environments globally and in a variety of other states around the U.S. and specifically in West Michigan. And so we're having a blast. It's been complicated. It's been challenging because the situations that require the attention has a lot of weightiness to it. The pain and the heartbreak that so many leaders struggle through, the complexity of the decision making that they have to navigate, and the fact is that ministry takes a unique kind of toll on pastors, on missionaries, and other leaders that I think very few people have a real grasp and appreciation for. And so stepping into those environments, I consider it sacred space to be able to walk with those leaders. And so it wasn't a long period of time to get up to full time. It was one of those things that was already kind of burgeoning and really kind of mushroomed quickly once we were allowing the doors to open as much as we were and to be responsive to that. So excited to be doing it. Our kids are thriving. We've got our first grandchild due in June. And so we're excited about that, and bringing Dylan are anticipating a little girl. Due date is June 10, and so we're excited about that. We're excited about where our kids are at and the unique season we're in with them, as they've been kind of walking with us for so many years in pastoral ministry, and now in kind of their own launching and stepping into their new spaces and roles. And it's been just a blast to be able to be a part of that and to do this together as a family. It is weird to not be in pastoral ministry, to go through this past Easter weekend. Karla and I realized that it was the first time since we have been married that we went through an Easter weekend without being in pastoral ministry. It was weird, it was different, but so immensely grateful to be in the season that we're in, and excited about what comes next.
Cool. Well, you guys want to talk about the retreat, what's been covered? So typically I like to start these. Ben doesn't like banter, so...
Meaningless banter.
Meaningless banter.
banter.
I like to start with an icebreaker of sorts so that we can get banter in, and it's kind of pointed. One of the first things that you said in the first session last night was this room is full of people who have chosen. We did that little board game with safety on each end, and then the Citadel at the center. Before I kind of talk about that, I should probably. Can you define what a Citadel Marriage is for the camera real quick?
What we started talking about last year and have continued this year in the retreat is this idea of a Citadel marriage. A Citadel is the part of the wall of a fortified city that is considered to be the stronghold. It's the place where when the Citadel is in place, the city is protected, the people within it are protected, and it offers hope to the city, because as long as the Citadel is in place, the city is doing what it needs to do to protect its citizens. If the Citadel falls, then the city will be run over very quickly. And so when I think about a Citadel marriage, I think about a place that is safe and secure and stable for the couple, but also a place that offers hope and security to everyone within its sphere. Its kids, its grandkids, and everyone, or the friends and the community around it, benefit from a strong marriage that is honoring God and is pursuing His design and desire for marriage.
Okay, so in that, like I said, we had the board game where you gave prompts and we had to move away from the Citadel as each prompt was applicable to us. As just kind of an icebreaker, if you guys feel comfortable, you have a moment that you feel comfortable talking about where you can think of where you actively chose to move toward the Citadel instead of toward safety.
Are you asking me or are you asking these
All
guys?
of you. If none of you start, I can start with mine.
That's all right.
I think there have been so many times in my relationship with my wife where we would get in conflict and my ego got wounded and I would feel frustrated, and so I would emotionally withdraw, I would shut down, and quite frankly, I would know that she wanted connection with me, but I would not offer that to her because I wanted her to feel the pain that I was feeling. And so many times having to work through that and realizing that if I continue to do the same thing, I'm going to get the same result. And so I just remember coming home one night after a seminary class, and we had been in this ongoing conflict for 3, 4, 5 days. And I remember walking in the door, and the natural response would have been to walk in the door, say, I love you, good night, and then basically just head to bed. And I remember kind of putting my bag down, saying goodnight, walking towards the bedroom and going, you're a fool if you just continue to do the same thing. And I remember coming back to her, sitting down and saying, I love you, I'm sorry, can we talk? And immediately both of us started crying. And it was a reset for both of us where God softened both of our hearts and allowed us to engage. And I've come back to that moment many, many times where I've thought, when I initiate, when I move towards her, when I turn towards her rather than turning away, God has routinely shown up and brought healing in a retroactive way, in ways that we didn't even anticipate because of the willingness to let go of that ego. But I hate to admit that my ego is far more fragile than I think it should be, and I'm much more of an insecure person than I ever want to admit, particularly when it comes to conflict in my marriage.
You want to jump in, Neil?
Sure. It's not surprising that hearing you say that, I recognize that in myself too, in that for several years, as Wendy and I would have a conflict, whether it's finances or disciplining the children or buying a car, whatever it is, you know, if there's a conflict and we have this discussion and things get a little heated, and we would get to a point where we're like, we're done talking, just, you know, let's separate for a little bit. And if there are times when my ego would get in the way and I would walk away and I would say to myself, you know, this isn't a hill to die on.
Sure.
You know, this is something that you can kind of just give it up, you know. Let's come together, apologize. You know, I needed to apologize for not being loving, I guess, and going back and not waiting for her to apologize to me, but man up, you know, and they're not going to take my man card from me if I apologize first, you know.
They might even give you an extra one.
That's right. Give me a punch card, you know. So, but over the years, it's become easier to even stop in the conflict and say, look, I'm sorry. Let's just back off in this and let's start over on this discussion. And you know, it's, even if I'm not at fault, so, you know, it doesn't hurt to apologize and just start over. You know, let's just stop where we're at, make a U-turn, and do it right.
Yeah, that's good. I like the game you started off with last night, because we're actually moving the pieces toward safety. And I know you, but I was also kind of like trapped, because I was just thinking like, I'm moving towards safety, but none of these things are safe, not really safe. And then I thought about it and I was like, no, that's true, because safety can actually get in the way. When we retreat to a place that's safe for us, that can actually get in the way of building a secure marriage, you know? And so I just, over the year, I mean, I met my wife when I was 20 and she was 18. So you can imagine the major insecurities that I had and just how the millions of stories you can tell. But I mean, I did retreat to a place of safety, you know, which was based in insecurity and taking things personally, like everything personally, when she didn't respond the way that I wanted her to. And that was, ironically, that was safe, and that was keeping us from building a relationship of real security. So there's good safety, right? But then there's also the kind of safety that is actually in the way of growing a marriage. So I love the focus for this weekend.
I think for me, one specific time I can remember, and my wife's over there.
Yeah, she's 10 feet away.
I don't know if she's going to.
And your brother-in-law is like 5 feet away. This is interesting.
So there was one time a handful of years ago where we were having prolonged, significant conflict. And I remember getting home, because we would have these fights over text, and that's just like the worst way to fight. And it just, I got home and I was just so angry. And like, none of you have ever been to my house, but you get into the garage and there's a door going into the house, and I'm sitting there in my car going, oh, I don't want to go through. I don't want to. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to put my car in reverse. I'm going to go away. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was like the spirit. I don't know if it's just myself. I doubt it was myself. I doubt it was myself. But something in the back of my head was like, you need to go through that door, and you're gonna f this up, but you got to go through it. And
so real in the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just, you look back on it and you go, why was that so hard? But in the moment, it really is that hard. It feels like life and death.
I also love how I don't remember exactly what the opening slide says, but the words that it has underneath Citadel, hope is one of them, because I don't think any of the rest of those can exist without hope.
Absolutely.
Good.
To kind of move on, the next kind of main point that caught in my head was the idea of those barriers to the Citadel marriage.
Absolutely.
I was looking at that list and I was going, can you talk about maybe how those are connected? Or to me, it felt like they flow out of each other very, like one leads into the next and leads into the next, and it just snowballs.
Yeah, I mean, I think we threw 8 of them up on the screen, and really there was 2 major issues. One is to specifically identify what the barriers are, but the second is to recognize there's just a lot of things working against healthy marriages, right? And some of those things are our own brokenness. Some of those things are the cultural issues that are around us, and some of those things are the spiritual warfare issues that we're contending with. And so I think you're right that they do interplay off of each other, whether it be unconfessed or unrepentant of sin and the shame that comes from that, and how that drives our fears and that we don't manage those fears well. And sometimes the shame further exacerbates the fears that we feel and how intensely we experience those things getting triggered in our lives, whether it be systemic family dysfunctions that we've just normalized that now we bring into the relationship, but it's the shame and the unrepented sin that now allows those things to just play themselves out without any real framework for dealing with them in a healthy, productive way. And we self-justify because that's how my family did it, so why wouldn't I just bring that in and do it the same way over and over again? And so I think those things do interconnect and kind of they're interdependent on one another. And at the end of the day, my take is we got to realize what they are, recognize that it's not a cut and dry, hey, just deal with it and move on. It's like some of these things are going to be there. They're going to be pervasive. They're going to maybe even be perpetual. But if we can be aware of them and we can continue to find and source our hope, our security, our identity in Christ, then we have the opportunity to have the resources necessary to contend with them so that they don't have a debilitating effect on our marriage, and that we don't take out the stuff that we deal with on our spouse in a way that wounds them unnecessarily, and that they can become a co-conspirator with us in contending with those issues rather than them driving a wedge between us in our marriage.
I think, and some of them are really sneaky too, like the family dysfunction one, or just anything related to your family of origin. Like, you don't necessarily know it's there, because it's not necessarily overt until you get into a situation with another person, and it's like, oh, I thought that we thought the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we normalize dysfunction so much and we don't even realize it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And it's funny because last night I talked to you afterwards, or during, and then today you brought up some of the things that we talked about. And I think when one of those blocks that hits is that we go into a marriage with preconceived ideas because of nowadays social media or Hollywood, or even watching other families in their dysfunction and whatever. And so as we go into a marriage, we're putting preconceived ideas or preconceived expectations on our spouse, and they're doing the same thing, so it's compounded.
Yeah, well said.
And so it's like, man, if we could head these things off in our young people's marriages, so they didn't have to experience the heartache that we had to fight through over the years. So
Yep, absolutely.
I like the inner vows thing last night. It really resonated with me, just that along the lines of what Neil's saying, just these unspoken things that like I'm not even aware of, but maybe at some level aware of, but not aware of just the dynamics that I'm bringing into the marriage. But I'm going to make sure this never happens.
Absolutely.
And how aware am I of all of those things? That's been big for us.
yeah, and the dysfunctions of family, and when that was talked about, family dysfunctions, it's like you don't think your family is dysfunctional until you're kind of away from it.
Yeah.
And I never thought of my family as being dysfunctional until later in life, and Wendy would say to me, "You're a lot like your dad." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And then she's like,
That's not a compliment. Usually it's not, is it?
Well, it was, but it wasn't. It's one of those compliment sandwiches.
Yeah, compliment sandwich is good.
Yeah, and it's like, your dad is as great of a dad as he was, has taught you things. There were things that, as a husband, he was not great at.
That's good.
Like, audibly telling your mother that he loved her in front of you, or showing affection, and so those were things that I had to learn on my own and probably didn't learn in the correct way, or just solving disagreements because we never saw them fight or argue. So what we didn't see as dysfunction really is. So
The dysfunctional thing is interesting because every family has dysfunction. Some are far more dysfunctional than others, but your ability to identify what is the kind of dysfunction that my family has, and then what do I need to do to make sure that it doesn't cause damage in my marriage is so incredibly important. But if I just walk in thinking my family is normal and it's the only healthy one, and so I'm just going to replicate the same, we can never actually deal with the reality of how this is going to show up and how it's going to be confronted with the dysfunction that my spouse is bringing in, and then that just creates a combustible.
and how do you not pass that down to your children?
Yeah. We're either probably passing on a similar thing
Yeah.
if we're not aware, or we're going so far, we are aware at some level of how bad it is, but we're going so far to overcorrect it that we're now in a territory on the other end of the continuum, but it's no more healthy
Fixed it.
than
Exactly.
what we were
Well
raised
said.
with.
Well said.
Especially it's interesting because like when you're a kid, like you talked about, seeing your dad show affection, or like the ways in which he's a good man but not necessarily doesn't operate as a husband the most optimally. You can't make that distinction when you're a kid. It's all kind of one ball of confusion. All right, so just to move on, one of the things that also caught me, you talked about Galatians 5:13 through 15. Does anyone have like a Bible around here somewhere we could read that, and then you could just talk about it?
Sure.
Yeah, we're kind of using this passage as the primary text for this retreat, and it's Paul's language in Galatians 5. I just think is incredibly focused on understanding and appreciating what's been offered to us, but then recognizing the responsibility that comes with the beauty of what the gospel had offered to us. And my old eyes are having a hard time. Here we go. Galatians 5:13 to 15. For you have been called to live in freedom, my brothers and sisters, but don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. For the whole law could be summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. But if you are always biting and devouring one another, watch out. Be aware of destroying one another. The reality is that the gospel has offered us something different, right? The gospel has offered us freedom and security and stability. It's offered us an identity that is not caught up in our family dysfunction. It's not caught up in our own past, but in a sense of who we are in Christ and what he's accomplished for us. And he's given us a new hope and a new future and a new destiny. And so the question is, what do we do with that? Well, the truth is that for many, we take that grace and we take all of that blessing and we say, okay, now God's going to forgive me and he's going to let me off the hook on these things. And so we don't recognize that we are called to be a conduit of that blessing in the lives of others, to be an instrument of his work in us and through us in the lives of other people. And rather than it just being an excuse to go operate however we want to, we're called to serve one another in love, to serve sacrificially, to give of ourselves. There is nobody in this world that has the power to bless my wife the way that I do. But there's also nobody else in this world that has the power to cause damage to my wife the way that I do. And the question is, am I going to leverage the freedom and the resources that have been that I have been called to steward for the purpose of investing in my spouse and for building a Citadel marriage? Or am I going to use it just to kind of justify myself and to go get whatever desires and cravings that I have met, thinking that somehow I can have a cheap grace that God's just going to forgive me for whatever path that I take? And so to come back to that question over and over again, are we biting and devouring one another? Are we causing damage that we don't even realize that we're causing? Or are we serving one another and that we're blessing our spouse and then we're creating an environment where they can thrive and where ultimately they can become all of what God has called them and created them to be? And that's my core desire in my marriage. It's what I want to model for my kids. And I believe it's what allows us to have the greatest impact on the world around us.
Okay, that's good. That reminds me kind of something you said in our episode about Easter, about relocating hope.
Yeah.
Do you think, you said that was it the resurrection
reversals.
The resurrection reversal
Yep.
allowed us to relocate hope.
Yes.
Would you say that having building a Citadel Marriage also kind of allows that?
Will you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends on what freedom is, right? And so to me, the gospel frees us from our sin nature for something.
Yeah,
it's always
absolutely.
directional. It's not just my shackles are off and I can go do whatever I want.
Yeah.
True freedom, I think, is, especially in Christ, is the ability to be all that God's created me to be.
Absolutely.
And that is to be a sacrificial lover of my wife, obviously, and to do that well because I'm getting it from another source, because I've been freed.
Absolutely.
I've been freed from the shackles of sin, from the bondage of trying to find my hope in something outside of Christ, things that won't last, right? So we talk about relocated hope, the resurrection ultimately provides me with the ability to go, I can't plant my flag anywhere in this life alone, because wherever I plant it, it's going to be taken away from me. And so I have to relocate it into the next life. I can still put my hope in things in small sorts of ways, but big picture, I have to plant my flag into the next life and everything, and the promises that will never be taken away, that are offered and that are irrevocable and will definitely happen. And so I think there is a relationship between that and freedom, because true freedom is found when I'm unshackled, where I'm not beholden to any particular thing that could be. Suffering and death is going to take away every hope that I can accumulate here, right? And so that's why the resurrection becomes so important in that.
Absolutely.
Connected to freedom for sure.
So the next thing I have written down here, although I don't have the I don't have the prompt that caught me. You talked about firm foundation, invest, repair. Is that a process, or is that a thing that has to exist kind of all at once? Because it doesn't seem like you could be on mission together without being able to function at the rest of them.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Is it a process, or is it a goal or orientation? And what I would say is probably both. So when I think about coming together in marriage, and Ben and I have done extensive work in the premarital setting, you're trying to lay the groundwork for saying, what is that foundational piece of a shared mission and a shared vision and shared goals and values, and what marriage is supposed to be and what it's supposed to accomplish. So I think that's the goal, is that it would have a firm foundation of those things. But we all know that as we grow spiritually, that foundation is something that should be bolstered. It should be developed further over time, as Ben identified. Like, I got married when I was 21. The insecurities, the ego, the bravado, all of the messiness of that, even though I would love to say that it was just when I was 21 and not when I'm 48, I would hope that over the last 28 plus years, much of that I have at least refined and been able to better deal with. And so that foundation has gotten more and more secure in my own life, and now in the way that Karla and I are able to relate within marriage. And you're right, because at that point then, we're better able to invest in each other without expecting something in return, right? Without keeping score, without believing that somehow if I did this, then you're supposed to give me something in response. And if you don't, then I'm going to stop investing in you, which is, again, where the repair piece comes in, because we're going to have inevitable conflict. We're going to hurt each other. We're going to misstep times where we just say the wrong thing. There are literally times, and I was thinking about this when you were speaking, there are literally times in our marriage where I say something that I think is completely innocuous, I think it's innocent, and she gets super offended by it. And there's times where I'm like, what did you hear me say? Like, what do you think I said, and what do you think were my intentions behind it? Because I have no idea what I missed on this one. And so the willingness to lean into that, to say, hey, I clearly miscommunicated something. Please tell me what that is. But to keep coming back to that repair, even when I think it's unfair, I think she should give me the apology first. Those things, a willingness, we call it eat the mushroom, right? The willingness to take the first step, use the opportunity that I have to bless my spouse by eating the mushroom, by being the first person to go rather than expecting them and waiting for them to finally do it. And then the fourth piece is that missional piece of being on mission together, meaning we're trying to accomplish something that goes beyond our lifetime, that ultimately it's not about us, but it's about what God is doing in us and through us in the world. And so from foundation to invest to repair and to be on mission, that firm relationship, I think it is both a goal and a process. And I think that you at least have to have the right perspective on what marriage is supposed to be and what it's supposed to accomplish to even begin to engage them. But ideally, over time, you get better at each one, and that those things become more and more solidified, developed, and cultivated within the marriage.
I think it's funny to talk about how, asking Karla, like, what did you hear me say? I think all of us are incredibly, and like everyone is incredibly bad at hearing the tone with which they address their loved ones. Because in my case, I mean, you both know me. I'm very sarcastic and very passive aggressive at times, and just not just bubbly, I guess. So like, if I'm not careful, I can take that out on my wife, and not even intentionally, not with any sort of like, it's just my default.
Sure.
So that's one of the things that I hope to carry out of this weekend. Going, think about how you're saying and less about what you're saying, maybe. The other thing that caught me, and I apologize, most of this is from the first session. It was just hitting in my brain. You made this comment about I forget what book you were quoting or what person you were quoting. There are no marriage problems. There's a me problem and an over here problem, and they just kind of join together. And you said you wrestle with that sometimes. So because I love to watch you wrestle with ideas outwardly, or just like in a staff meeting or whatever, can you do that a little bit for us here?
That's a good question. And I'd love for these two guys to jump in, because I think you've got some stuff to offer here. But I think what I was saying is that the statement has been said, there are no marriage problems, there's individual problems that come into a marriage. And I think that's, in some ways, I think that's true, meaning I've got my own junk, I've got my own insecurities, my own baggage, I bring that into the marriage, and then that creates conflict. Now, I do think the very nature of it being a cross-cultural relationship, which is what marriage is, male and female, it's cross-cultural. So you're bringing different perspective, different vantage point, different lived experiences, different ways of understanding and valuing certain things. And I think that in and of itself does create conflict. But I think the bigger point that's being made is whether that creates huge volatility and conflict, or whether that's just a bump that needs to be worked through and overcome, has a lot to do with what I bring to the conversation. Meaning you're going to have inevitable conflict because of the nature of what marriage is and the intimacy that you're pursuing in marriage. But the question is, am I able to come to the table and see an opportunity to bless, to sacrifice, to defer, to surrender certain rights? Or do I come in going, no, you need to do it this way, you need to see it this way, these are my expectations, I'm going to impose them, and I'm going to try to get you to do what it is that I want you to do. John Gottman in his research says that we spend the first 4 years of marriage trying to get our spouse to work from the paradigm that we've come into marriage with. And then they're trying to do the same thing to us. Well, you can imagine the combustibility that creates. And the question is, what do you do with that? Do you eventually decide to try to build something uniquely together? Or does the marriage end up coming to a place of huge explosion because you're never willing to surrender the paradigm that you're trying to impose on the other person? And I think that's the bigger point in this. And so I just wrestle with how much of it is the dynamics of a cross-cultural male-female relationship versus how much of it is my own baggage that I'm bringing in, and how that creates problems when confronted with my own spouse's issues, and then we have a hard time figuring that out together. So,
You want to speak to that, Neil, at all?
Sure. Like you said, everybody has their own weaknesses, their own strengths, and maybe you and your spouse both have the same weaknesses, so there's something to work on there, and maybe you both have the same strengths, and so you're going to butt heads because you both want it your own way. But then there's going to be times when a strength or a weakness outside of the marriage, maybe it's at work or that at their work, that you bring home, that now, because men are fixers and women want to be heard, and so you're trying to mold all these different parts and pieces, and kind of like your Michelangelo's David, he's taken away what doesn't look like David, we're taking all these lumps of clay, our insecurities, and we just lump them into this big stone,
Sure.
and we're trying to now chip away at what doesn't look like a good marriage. You know, so it's like now you're looking at that firm, that foundation, invest, repair, mission. So your foundation hopefully is Christ in the Word, but now you're constantly investing, you're constantly repairing, and you're constantly looking at your mission and taking that clay or that stone, and that's what's chipping away. Is your investment is chipping away, and your repair is chipping away, and and your mission is hopefully that when you're done, like you said, the mission part of that is what part of your marriage is going to last past your lifetime.
Absolutely.
And that hit Wendy and I pretty good. We're like, you know, we really never really thought about how our marriage is going to last past our lifetime. What's it going to do to our children and our grandchildren and our great grandchildren?
Yeah.
You know, so it's that whole the issues outside and inside in our own. It's just a big messy mess that needs to be chipped away. So,
I've known you a long time, and I think it's the first time I've ever heard you say it's not about the marriage. The marriage doesn't have issues ultimately. I like that because I think it's a cop-out, right?
Yeah.
I'm having marriage issues as though like, so I just go get another marriage and I'll be fine. Or I have issues that I'm bringing into the marriage and she does too. But I mean, it lets me off the hook if I blame the marriage. Like, what am I bringing into the marriage that's causing dysfunction? It's not the marriage's fault.
Yeah.
Marriage didn't do anything wrong.
Yep.
You know, God created something pretty beautiful. We screw it up, but I don't want to be let off the hook that way. I think marriage is, or could be, it's the first time I've thought about this today. It could be like, it's kind of like an echo of this, you know, the work that we're doing.
Sure.
So the marriage maybe amplifies or echoes whatever we're saying or whatever tune we're singing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the marriage is in of itself, that's not the issue.
Absolutely.
So well said.
Because otherwise, it's simple to say that I married the wrong person. If I marry the
Yes.
right person, then I
Yes.
won't have these
Yep.
issues.
You're
Like,
off the
no,
hook.
You're actually going to, wherever you go, there you are, right? You're
Yes.
bringing you with you.
Yes.
So good luck with that. You
Yes.
when my kids were in school, take them to school the first day of the year. You know, you take them to school and I drop them off. And one of my children, I didn't have to worry about her grades or whatever. But the other two, I'd be like, this is the first day of school. Today you're going to school, a straight A student. It's up to you to keep it that way or to screw it up.
Sure.
So you're kind of doing marriage the same way. The first day of your marriage, you have a perfect marriage. It's up to you to screw it up or to keep it that way. You know, so
Keep rebuilding back
Yes,
towards
and
what you
repairing
want it to be.
when you mess it up.
That's another interesting thing that caught me out of that. You were talking about before lunch, building something that's going to last beyond me. Like you've always said, I want the people that come after me to be able to go past where you say it way more eloquently than me, but it's for a long time it's been hard for me because like my wife and we don't have kids yet. So it's like, are we really building something that's going to go beyond us? And like that struck me, and since then I've been like, have I been thinking about this in a very like myopic way? Like what kind of horse blinders have I been putting on? Does it go further than that? Like, how do I quantify that?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. I would say two things to that. Number one, I think it's impossible for us to have an appreciation for the impact that we have on the people in our sphere, regardless, right? So people see us, they respond to us, they find hope in the midst of what we're offering, or they lose hope because of that. So I think that's part of it. But I think when you are part of a community of faith, so you have nieces and nephews and others in your family, but then you come into a community of faith. That community of faith, and this is where I think you're going to ask me the specific question about this one house conversation, but this is where my heart is on, as a community of faith, that one house has a strong marriage at the core of it. It is a strong, thriving marriage at the core that then allows for others to be blessed, to be encouraged, and to thrive as it comes into its sphere.
heal.
Right? To heal, right? To find hope, to
Yes.
find support, to find encouragement. And so when I think about anybody, it doesn't matter if you've got kids or not have kids, the multi-generational impact of having thriving marriages in that one house where people are able to be blessed, to be encouraged, and where we can get out of our own way and recognize the opportunity to just focus on the needs and the ways in which other people are showing up and would be benefited by us investing in them and by us pouring our resources into them. Those things are so central, whether or not I have kids or grandkids. In fact, I would argue that if I don't have kids or grandkids, the opportunity for me to allocate time and energy towards individuals where I can pour into them, where I don't have to allocate that time and energy to my kids and grandkids and others, I think is even greater.
True story.
And it's why you see aunts and uncles, and it's why you see other family members and other people within the community that can be a huge blessing to individuals. And you see this with singles too, where they're not even married, but because they understand their foundation and they recognize the opportunity to invest and to repair relationships and to be on mission, that they get to pour into other people too. And so I don't think it has anything to do with kids or grandkids when it comes to multi-generational impact. I think that's an expression of it, but I think it goes well beyond that. And within a local church, you want Citadel marriages that are focused on pouring themselves in to other people and helping others thrive and to find healing and hope and restoration. Because out of that, the gospel is elevated. It has tentacles that begin to step into every part of society. And as a local church, it has an opportunity to really thrive.
We put limitations on ourselves based on our circumstances, and there's some real sadness there, like couples that can't have kids and all singleness and all sorts of stuff. We put limitations on ourselves. God is not limited by any of those things. You know, a heart that chases after God, God will use that and amplify in ways that you could never have possibly fathomed for His glory and your transformation. That's just the truth.
Well said.
I think it's interesting you talk about that approach towards Citadel marriages in the context of singles. I was thinking about that a lot as you were going through the second session or two. It's not even just like, it's obviously it's very important for our marriages, but it's also just like, it's good advice for single people, like the get to the balcony thing. Like, if I would have known that going through like my early 20s or just in my 20s in general, get above what you're fighting about because you can't really see it.
Yeah, and I think you could say I want to be a Citadel teacher, right? I was talking to Brian Wazlowski about this. Like he looks at this and says, I have a Citadel marriage, but I want to be a Citadel teacher. I think about being a Citadel friend. I think about being a Citadel leader. Like this idea of how do I approach my relationships and my roles in society from the perspective I want security and stability for everyone within my sphere, and I want to be a hope giver in the way that they encounter me. And that, that Citadel idea then begins to permeate into every other area. That's cool.
And then the last thing I really have written down here, that verse you used from 1 Peter 3. Could we read that? And then I love that in the same way language.
Yeah, so there's the passage in 1 Peter 3. We've used it a lot for marriage stuff, but a couple years ago as I was studying it, and I realized that phraseology in the same way showed up a couple of times. And so I'll kind of read that section and then I'll pull back. But it says in 1 Peter 3, it's a familiar passage about marriage. It says, to wives, in the same way, you wives must accept the authority of your husbands. Then even if some refuse to obey the good news, your godly lives will speak to them without any words. They will be won over by observing your pure and reverent lives. Then you jump down to verse 7, and it says, in the same way, you husbands must give honor to your wives. Treat your wife with understanding as you live together. She must be weaker than you are. She may be weaker than you are, but she is your equal partner in God's gift of new life. Treat her as you should, so your prayers will not be hindered, which again is a pretty sobering passage about how we treat our wives and the impact that has spiritually. But if you back up, the question has to be, in the same way wives, in the same way husbands, well, in the same way as what? Well, that's the question on the table. And so if you go back to 1 Peter 2, he talks about in the same way is referencing his sense of in verse 21 of 1 Peter 2, for God called you to do good, even if it means suffering, just as Christ suffered for you. He is your example, and you must follow in his steps. And then he says, in the same way, wives. And then in the same way, husbands. And I just have looked at that and thought, man, what an incredibly high bar of responsibility that I have, that it's my job to suffer in the way that Christ suffered for me, in the way that I care for, love, and support my spouse. And there may be nothing out there that's more countercultural than that when it comes to marriage. That actually the suffering and the sacrifice is not the thing that I tolerate in the way that I do marriage. It's the thing that I embrace because it's the opportunity that I have to actually model Christ, and because it's the model that's been afforded to me. And imagine Christian marriages embracing the idea of sacrifice and suffering as they invest and as they seek to repair, for the opportunity to have a strong, restored marriage, and then for that restored marriage to then be able to impact the sphere in which they operate. That is a powerfully sobering thought to me. It's one of the most convicting things that I've ever encountered when it comes to marriage, and it's the thing that I am working diligently to live out, flailing around, incredibly limited. I am trying to figure out how to live that out day in and day out with my spouse.
And it's, the passage says to the suffering and the sacrifice. And I think if you look at the word suffer, everybody seems to go right to, I got to go to that wedding, or I got to go shopping and hold her purse. Well,
Target.
That's the suffering that comes to mind. But actually, to suffer somebody or to suffer with them is to take on their challenges and to take on the other things that they have a passion for. That's the, when you hear, if you look back at the old English language, to suffer with somebody is to stand beside and to go with them through. It's
That's great.
to suffer with them rather than I'm not gotta go shopping. That's not the suffer that we're talking about. It's not like not being able to do the things you want to do. It's taking up the cross and suffering with.
Journey with. I
Very
love that.
well said.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we are getting near the end of the time.
Kind of beat you to the one house
Yeah.
thing.
I did. He did.
I told you, your prompts are pretty on point there, Jake.
I do want to ask, just because this is the first two sessions, and people at home are going to get the third one.
Sure.
Could you give us like the 3-minute
Summary
Of
of
the last one? Yeah, so we're gonna talk about communication and conflict, and we're gonna talk about what does healthy conflict look like. We're gonna talk about what are some of the most invalidating ways in which we respond to our spouse, where we say, "Oh, you're just being overly dramatic. Why are you being so sensitive?" The fact that when we offer an apology, it's incredibly insincere, or it doesn't really move us in the direction of repair because we disqualify it by saying, "I'm sorry, but," or "I'm sorry you feel that way," all of those kinds of things. And so as we think about what does healthy conflict really look like, and how do we move that in that direction, and here's the spoiler. We're going to end the entire thing with everybody's going to get a spade. It's going to be a small shovel. And what we're going to do is talk about the fact that we all use this shovel for one of two things. In Hebrews, it talks about the root of bitterness that grows up in us. And so we either have a responsibility to plow up or to dig up that root of bitterness, to get rid of it so it doesn't develop as entitlement and contempt in our heart, or we dig up old offenses and we bring them into the present conflict that we're dealing with. We're using the shovel one way or the other. The question is, are we using it to dig up old offenses, or are we using it to dig up the root of bitterness and to discard it? And that shovel imagery to me is the way I want to kind of finish out this Citadel Marriage concept of, it's our job to choose to use the shovel in a way that gets rid of that root of bitterness and doesn't ever allow it to have room to breathe or to be cultivated, because of the power that it has to move towards resentments, to entitlement, to contempt, and to create a wedge that is at some points feels almost irredeemable if we allow it to take root and really take off. So we're either going to dig that up, or we're going to do what we oftentimes do, is dig up old offenses and just bring that into our present experience.
Great.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you another opportunity to answer the how does a Citadel marriage make us more like or help us to become that one house? If you already feel
Sure.
you answered it
Sure.
enough, just let me know.
Okay.
I'm just going to give you
No.
another opportunity.
No, I would love you guys to chime in. To me, a Citadel marriage is the kind of thriving marriage that everybody wants to be around, right? Like we've all been in the space where that couple is uncomfortable to be around because they have so much conflict. There's always tension. There's a nervous energy around them because they just don't get along. They don't know how to care for each other. Karla and I talk about this all the time. We want to be in a marriage where people gravitate towards us because they can exhale, right? But where they feel like they can step into our presence and our care for one another makes other people feel safe, makes them feel secure, makes them feel cared for, and where they want to be in that space. And I think about that one house. If that one house is full of marriages that people want to gravitate towards, where they feel safe and secure and they feel like they can be offered hope in that space, that becomes contagious. That becomes something that is so incredibly appealing. And ultimately, as we talk about so often, you want to create a space that people want to be a part of, that people see it as something that is unavoidable, and they want to move in that direction because healthy marriages are attractive to other people, and they have the power to showcase the grace and the gospel, and that other people look at that and say, I don't even know that I believe who this Jesus is. I don't even know that I agree with you about what he's accomplished, but I want to be a part of something like that. I want to be around that. I want to be responsive to that. And that creates this space for them to finally buy into the truth of what Christ has accomplished, because they see the transformative power in your own marriage. They're attracted to it. It becomes appealing. And now they become what God has called them to be, because they're responding to what they've seen and the environment that you've created by the kind of marriage that you have. It's a great question about what do Citadel marriages offer when it comes to this one house. And what I would say is that healthy, thriving marriages that are Citadel marriages that seek to provide security and stability for one another and then offer hope to those in their sphere creates an irresistible environment for everyone within its sphere. We all have relationships with people that their marriage is so contentious, it's so high conflict that you're on edge when you're around it. You don't actually want to be around it, and you kind of find reasons to not have to gravitate towards them. Karla and I have said for years that we want to be the kind of marriage that people are attracted to, that they find the ability to exhale when they're around, that we can be a non-anxious presence, and that we can bless one another, encourage one another, and be a healthy model for how to do life together. Not because I'm an easy person to get along with, because sometimes I'm not. And I've got my flaws, and Ben can speak to that pretty eloquently. But
Yes,
the
I will.
reality
Next
is,
episode.
but the truth is, we want the kind of marriage that people want to respond to and be connected to. And so that one house, if that one house has marriages that are seeking to be Citadel marriages, people will be attracted to it. They will be exposed to the gospel because of the hope that those marriages are able to offer. And even if they don't believe the same thing about who Jesus is, that exposure and that natural gravitation towards that will make them more receptive and responsive. And you'll see transformation happen because marriages are showcasing the gospel through the way that they relate to one another, forgive one another, seek to serve one another, and seek to bless those within their sphere.
It's so interesting thinking about it, just because usually when I ask Ben that or Josh that at the end of the episodes, it all comes back to being, we want to be more attractive. We want to be irresistible. We want to showcase the attractiveness of the gospel. And it just, for a couple of weeks, I've been like, should I stop asking that question? He says the same thing, but it comes down to that. Like, we can't have the impact if we are not attractive to other people to bring them in some capacity.
Yes. Well said.
But other than that, thank you for taking the time to sit down. I'm eating away from their free time. Thank you guys, all of you. If you would like to check us out this week, you can check us out on Instagram, YouTube. We have Facebook, SEC, or Instagram is at Sparta Center Church. I'm not sure what YouTube is anymore. I should know that as I run it. Nate, if they want to Actually leadership?
Yeah, there's
have
a
any
there's a
sort of social?
website. Yeah, there's an actually leadership group website that's information that you can check out. It's pretty generic right now. It'll have more stuff over the next couple of weeks on it, and the opportunity to continue to build that out and the presence. But to be honest with you, the work that we've been doing, figuring out the social media presence, is something that I've got people helping me with that, but it's not been the high priority simply because in some ways the marketing side of it is something that I am terrible at. And don't really want to go make happen until I have more bandwidth.
I think you also have plenty of opportunities.
So, yes,
it's already
that's
come
the
your
thing.
way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think Jay can probably put the details
So-
and links in the
Yeah.
description.
Definitely
below,
can.
right?
Sure.
If,
Yeah.
if
Yeah,
you
that'd be
text
great.
us.
Yep, you got it.
I was gonna say, and I just because I didn't say anything that I wanted to say when you were introducing him, I just so appreciate the fact that you are still connected with SEC, and I really love that. Even though you've moved on to the next phase, we are still able to leverage those relationships that you built across the world to become
huge blessing.
that one house.
One of the great privileges and blessings that I experience professionally and personally.
Other than that, we thank you for joining us for this episode of the Becoming That One House podcast. I think that I'm going to put this up on a Wednesday, so we will be back at you on Friday. I think that's going to be the first episode of the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about the Ascension. Other than that, have a great day.